prestige, and success. It's another dazzling lifestyles of the rich and famous.
Billionaire Michael Steinhardt surrenders $70 million in stolen relics.
Fantasy, there's a surprising price to pay.
Steinhardt, a hedge fund manager, has been given a lifetime ban on acquiring more antiquities.
Hi everyone, and welcome to my channel, Jaime Leigh Art. My name is Jaime Leigh, and I'm a mixed media artist. Here on my channel, I do time-lapse painting videos, I demonstrate the use of a light box, and I also have a series of weird art videos where I talk about the weird side of art. Art and true crime, paranormal art, strange tales from art history, and more. If any of that sounds appealing to you, I'd love it if you'd hit the subscribe button and hit the bell icon for notifications of when I post new videos. Supposedly, subscribers get notified. Allegedly. I'm so glad you decided to take time out of your day to check out this video, which is, in my opinion, fascinating because a recent news event has confirmed what we have suspected about the sort of final resting place of stolen artworks. On December 7th, 2021, news broke that New York billionaire and former hedge fund legend Michael Steinhardt would be returning 180 pieces of art antiquities he held in his personal art collection, pieces valued in total at $70 million. Now, if you'll recall, if you've watched my videos on various art heists, such as the Gardner Museum heist, and the Montreal Museum of Fine Art heist, you'll remember that it has long been suspected by art heist experts and investigators that stolen art is never stolen to sell publicly and often changes hands through many organizations in many countries, eventually making its way into the collections of a small group of people, the world's most wealthy art collectors. It has been said that either the collectors purchase these pieces in what they believe is a lawful manner, or that they purchase them knowing full well the path these artworks took to get to them was shady, but either they don't care or they don't intend to publicly show off the pieces anyway. I mean, these people are billionaires, and for many of them, having an eclectic and interesting art collection is something they've invested heavily in. As for knowing/not knowing where the pieces came from or that they're actually stolen, I mean, anyone can claim ignorance, but again, these people are the elite, wealthiest people in the world. They didn't get there by being stupid. Now, these underground art sales have been happening for decades, probably longer. But now there are more top-tier wealthy people in the world than in the past. And they need something to do with their excess cash, right? Well, it seems one man has shattered the illusion that wealthy collectors keep all their acquisitions above board. And his name is Michael Steinhardt. In this video, we will look at what happened, who Michael Steinhardt is, and why I think Mr. Steinhardt's protestations of innocence are a little suspicious. Let's get into it. Articles started hitting the news networks in December of 2021, all saying basically the same thing. New York billionaire Michael Steinhardt had just been busted for having stolen artwork in his personal art collection. Not just one or two pieces, mind you, but 180. And if you look further into Steinhardt, and I did, this is not the first time he has been busted, although it is the biggest. So here's how this most recent story began. Well, it actually began back in 2017, when authorities raided Steinhardt's home and office and seized a marble statue stolen from a Lebanese temple. This led to the formation of a trafficking unit, essentially, who would spend the next 4 years immersed in the world of stolen art and antiquities. The unit would recover 3,000 items valued at $200 million. And they have already returned 1,500 of the 3,000 items to the real owners. But the unit kept coming back to this Steinhardt guy. In 2018, there was another incident involving Steinhardt and the authorities over items he had in his home and office that were stolen from Greece and Italy. Now, Steinhardt was no small-time art collector. It seems he approached his art collection with the same vigor and competitive spirit that had driven him to become the, quote, best hedge fund manager in the history of Wall Street, unquote. This guy didn't do anything half-assed. Let's put it that way. In fact, the investigation into Steinhardt revealed that he had owned and traded over 1,000 antiquities since 1987, and that his collection was valued at $200 million. Now, that trafficking unit found over the course of their 4-year investigation that the stolen pieces in Steinhardt's collection, number one, numbered 180 pieces, and number two were worth a combined $70 million. They also discovered the pieces had been looted or smuggled from 11 different countries, ranging from Egypt and Greece to Libya and Syria, requiring 17 different warrants. The pieces were trafficked by 12 different illicit networks, and the pieces had appeared on the international art market without the lawful paperwork they were supposed to have. The face of the investigation was New York County District Attorney Cyrus Vance Jr. And according to published information, there will be no trial for Michael Steinhardt. Instead, the DA's office reached an agreement with Steinhardt that he will return all 180 stolen pieces. And, oh, small caveat, he is barred from ever purchasing artwork again for the rest of his life. This deal avoids a grand jury inquiry for Steinhardt and also allows the stolen pieces to be returned right away, rather than being held indefinitely for evidence if there was to be a trial. Here's a brief rundown of a few of the items in Steinhardt's collection that turned out to be stolen. Number 1, the stag's head Rhyton, stolen from Turkey and worth $3.5 million. Number 2, the Larnax, stolen from Crete and worth $1 million. Number 3, the Ercolano fresco, stolen from Herculaneum and worth $1 million. Number 4, the gold bolt, stolen from Iraq and worth $200,000. And the 3 death masks, stolen from Israel and worth $650,000. So how does one explain away over 100 pieces of stolen art? If you are billionaire Michael Steinhardt, you say this through your lawyers. Andrew Levander and Theodore Wells Jr. in a statement said, many of the dealers from whom Mr. Steinhardt bought these items made specific representation as to the dealers' lawful titles to the items and to their alleged provenance. To the extent these representations were false, Mr. Steinhardt has reserved his rights to seek recompense from the dealers involved. So he basically tried to insinuate the dealers he bought from are at fault, giving him the impression that they had a lawful right to sell the pieces, on the art market, without the lawful paperwork that they needed. As someone who had been in the art buying industry for years, you'd think you would know that. So, innocence by ignorance, I guess you could say. Now, according to the statements put out by the DA Vance, this is a crock of shit. And I paraphrase. Vance said in a statement, for decades, Michael Steinhardt displayed a rapturous appetite for plundered artifacts without concern for the legality of his actions, the legitimacy of the pieces he bought and sold, or the grievous cultural damage he wrought across the globe. His pursuit of new additions to showcase and sell knew no geographical or moral boundaries, as reflected in the sprawling underworld of antiques traffickers, crime bosses, money launderers, and tomb raiders he relied upon to expand his collection, Vance said. So which is the real story? I think that if we take a look at Michael Steinhardt himself, who he is, how he lived his life, and what influenced him in his younger years, the answer will become quite clear, in my opinion, of course. So who is Michael Steinhardt? Michael Steinhardt was born on December 7th, 1940, in Brooklyn, New York. He graduated high school early at age 16 and attended and graduated from the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School of Business, graduating in 1960 while he was still in his teens. Upon graduating, he had several different jobs in the finance industry. He became a research associate and worked at a few different finance firms. Then, in 1967, 2 major things happened. The first was that in a carpool he was in, there was also a woman named Judy, who he would go on to marry, and they would have 3 children and 13 grandchildren. Apparently, he won over Judy and her family, since on one of the carpool rides he made mention of a company, and Judy mentioned this company to her father, who then went and invested in the company and ended up making a lot of money. The second thing that happened was that he started his own hedge fund in 1967 named Steinhardt, Fine, Berkowitz & Co., later called Steinhardt and Partners LP. From there, he went on to have what was described as one of the most spectacular careers in the history of Wall Street. If you're like me, you might wonder, what is a hedge fund, or what is a hedge fund manager? Because that's what Michael Steinhardt made his career out of. To describe it simply, according to what I discovered, a hedge fund is a group of sort of risky alternative investment choices, mostly for wealthy clients and institutions, where the hedge fund invests aggressively using various strategies to increase the return. The hedge fund manager, in this case Michael Steinhardt, manages, makes decisions, and oversees the operation of the hedge fund. He ran his fund from 1967 until 1995. In 1995, many were shocked when he decided to close his successful hedge fund and disperse it to the investors and partners. The year before, 1994, there was a bond market crisis, and his fund lost 1/3 of its value. However, by 1995, it was back to its normal successful returns. So why close it, and why now? It wasn't because there was anything shady going on at the time, although the fund had been investigated in the early 1990s for trying to manipulate the short-term treasury note market, and a settlement was reached with the Securities and Exchanges Commission and the Department of Justice. A settlement that was paid in part by Steinhardt's using his own personal funds. Not because he did anything wrong, he said, but so everyone could, quote, move on. It also wasn't because he wanted to get out of Wall Street, because he did end up opening Wisdom Tree Investments, which he ran until retiring in 2019. No, it seemed that Steinhardt was searching for more meaning out of life than, becoming a literal billionaire. And as he put it, quote, there must be something more virtuous to do with one's life than to make rich people richer. Steinhardt then entered a philanthropic phase of his life, although he actually did not like to be referred to as a philanthropist. However, his own foundation, the Steinhardt Foundation for Jewish Life, states that Steinhardt is one of the Jewish world's leading philanthropic forces. In addition to the foundation, he also founded Birthright Israel, which sends young Jewish people on heritage trips to Israel for free. He funded Jewish early childhood education programs, promoted the teaching of Hebrew in camps and charter schools, and founded numerous other efforts to foster Jewish culture and learning, as he had become greatly concerned through the years about the decline of Jewish life and culture in the diaspora, or the Jewish population outside of Israel. He also has involvement within Israel, including owning a home there and having the Michael Steinhardt Museum of Natural History in Tel Aviv. So clearly his passion after closing the hedge fund was to foster and promote Jewish ideals among young Jewish people. The kicker to all of this, the thing about this that just spun me sideways, this man who had poured millions of dollars and decades of work into helping Jewish people become more Jewish, basically, is an atheist. He has stated publicly that he does not believe in God, and in fact said that throughout the years, his hope that there is a moral and just God has actually lessened. He wasn't just interested in helping promote Jewish causes, however. He has an intense interest in animals and plants. In the 1990s, he bought 2 islands that were part of the Falklands and donated them to the Wildlife Conservation Society. He currently lives north of New York City on a 57-acre country estate with what is basically a collection of exotic zoo animals, including cranes, camels, land tortoises, zonkies, and more. And if you've never seen a zonkie, they're pretty cool to look at. I actually have a place up the road that had zonkies for a while. They're interesting. Ever the busy billionaire, he also served in Democratic leadership organizations, owned part of the Miami Marlins and the LA Dodgers, became a major contributor to New York University, and has several things that bear his name, including the Steinhardt Conservatory at the Brooklyn Botanical Gardens and the Steinhardt Gallery at the Metropolitan Museum of Fine Art. He was even on the American Advisory Board at Christie's, the world-famous auction house. Now, as you might have guessed from that little mention of his fund settlement with the SEC and the Department of Justice back in the 90s, Steinhardt is a bit of a riddle. On one hand, he's a savvy Wall Street Goliath who is known in business to have nerves of steel, yet he devotes time and money to help thousands of Jewish children and young adults. yet he's also an atheist. He was known as New York's most prolific art collector, yet we now know he did so without caring where the art came from. And yet there's more to that dark side. When I visited the Steinhardt Foundation's website, I stumbled across an open letter from the foundation's members and Steinhardt's family addressing articles in the Jewish Week and the New York Times that seemingly accused Steinhardt of propositioning women, which the letter vehemently denies, while also acknowledging that he has an inappropriate sense of humor and has had to apologize for comments he has made in the past. But according to some sources, 6 different women had accused Steinhardt of making unwanted sexual advances or propositions as of 2019. The New York Times article about the 2021 investigation into his purchase of stolen art also mentions the claims against him that he has displayed a pattern of sexual harassment against women. And finally, let's get to the subject that Michael Steinhardt stayed silent about for years. The first time Steinhardt publicly discussed his father was in his autobiography published in 2001 entitled No Bull: My Life in and Out of the Markets. Why did Steinhardt try to distance himself from dear old dad for so long? Well, for good reason. And also maybe because it was hard to face the fact that maybe the apple hadn't fallen so far from the tree. Steinhardt's father was named Saul Frank Steinhardt, but he was known as Red Mcgee and was a high-stakes gambler and New York's leading jewel fence. He had ties to many underworld figures, including Jimmy Aiello, Joey Anastasia, and more. He was convicted in 1958 of buying and selling stolen jewelry, and was sentenced to 2 5 to 10 year consecutive terms in New York state prisons, serving time upstate at Sing Sing. Steinhardt remembers mandatory visits with his father in prison, where for many years he firmly believed in his father's innocence, because his father told him he was innocent. The unfortunate thing is, Steinhardt may not have had the successful and storied life he lived without his father's help, despite the fact that he was well aware of his father's severe mood swings, his inability to be happy for his son's success, and his also inability to be a real father figure to his son. And yet, at an early age, his father helped Steinhardt get into investing. He would hand envelopes of $10,000 or more of cash for Steinhardt to invest. For his bar mitzvah, his father gave him stocks. In fact, thanks to Steinhardt Sr., he had amassed $200,000 before he was even an adult, and had more knowledge of investments and the stock market than people who had been in it for years. Yet he states in his book that he was only able to attend Wharton School of Business thanks to his father's illicitly gotten funds. Imagine the quandary this put Steinhardt in when he first began his career. He would never have gotten hired by big financial institutions if they knew that his old man was doing time at Sing Sing. So he didn't mention it. He didn't mention it for more than 30 years. And now, as an 81-year-old man, it appears he's inherited some of the traits of the father he tried so hard to distance himself from. I watched an interview with Michael Steinhardt and Charlie Rose where he was discussing his autobiography, which had just been published. He discussed his father's imprisonment, maybe for one of the first times publicly, and touched on the persona he had worn all these years on Wall Street. Was his thrill-seeking, adrenaline junkie time in the fast-paced world of investing handed down from his father? Did this lead to the thrill of collecting art that was stolen? In the interview, he likened the stock market to gambling and talked about the thrill, the adrenaline, etc., just like the high a gambler gets from gambling. He tried to steer his life in a new direction after closing down his fund to become the Jewish Brooklyn billionaire face of philanthropy, although he disliked calling it that. But behind the scenes, he was doing things that were at odds with his public face. The way DA Cyrus Vance portrays him, Steinhardt had his hand in what looks to be a modern Indiana Jones style operation, making use of antiques traffickers, crime bosses, and tomb raiders. Also, he could have new and rare items to add to his private collection. You can't tell me a man who lived the life he didn't know who he was buying from, who he was selling to, or that at least some of these treasures weren't acquired illegally somewhere along the supply chain. It just seems like he's too smart of a man to claim ignorance. Yet, despite Vance's strong condemnation of Steinhardt's actions, Steinhardt will never see a trial or a conviction. So it seems in the end he got off with a lighter sentence than his father had. Maybe that's the difference between being successful and being a billionaire. And that's the information that I found on the story behind how stolen art ends up where it ends up. Basically, we already kind of knew this, but now it has been confirmed in a very public way. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this story. Please let me know in the comments what you think about this. If you've ever heard of the billionaire Michael Steinhardt, because I know before this news article came out, I had never heard of him before, but it just seems like he is a very interesting person and also a very complicated person. And I guess he let the bad side take over and allowed himself to look the other way, knowing he was purchasing stolen art from countries all around the world. All right, guys, that's it for me today. I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe if you are so inclined. Hit the bell icon and you'll be notified when I post a new video. All right, have a great day. Bye. If you were a billionaire Michael Steinfeld.
I'm gonna sneak out to see my boyfriend.
I've got that on camera.
We put it as a blooper.
That would actually be really funny. And runs basically what is an exotic do. Exotic do. I'll say that in a minute. Son of a gun. I don't know if it's picking that up or not. Yet, despite Vance's strong condemnation, that's all being recorded. Goofy. Goofy. Good God.
Dear God?
I said good God. Gear. Dear God.
I thought you were making fun of me.
No.